Yeah, if you're dealing with fatigue, irregular cycles, mood swings, and you have been told you are fine, take a pill, you will be okay, this episode is for you. Cortisol borrows from the same building blocks that your body uses for progesterone. Think about it as cortisol when shopping, but using progesterone's credit card. Over time, low progesterone, poor sleep, worse PMS and irregular cycles, like I said. And then estrogen becomes unopposed. And that brings us to all of this bloating, breast tenderness, mood swings, and then the picture worsens. Doctor kinda said something is wrong. That is probably PCOS. And guess what? Here, take back this pill for birth control. This will solve all of your problems. And I said, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why PCOS is happening? And they said, we don't have answer. We don't know yet. The humanity just didn't solve this problem. Not yet.
Stress can stop your period, and it doesn't necessarily show up in the regular lab work. And it sometimes doesn't even show up in specialty lab work as well.
PCOS is more about hormonal imbalance overall. It is irregular periods, it is insulin resistance, it is high androgens, not cysts necessarily. Cysts are just one possible sign, one of the anatomic symptoms.
PCOS is more driven metabolically, and the cysts are actually a hallmark of PCOD, so polycystic ovarian disease. So in 2025, a study found that women under chronic physiological stress were twice as likely to show PCOS symptoms, even though their BMI was normal. So that's quite an interesting study over there. The first one, birth control fixes hormone imbalance.
It masks symptoms, doesn't fix cortisol, blood sugar, or nutrient issues.
Okay, PCOS only affects overweight women.
False lean PCOS is real and often even harder to diagnose.
Okay, if labs are normal, hormones are fine.
Labs are just snapshots, symptoms, real story. We need a complex understanding.
Stress is just in your head.
Stress leaves fingerprints everywhere. It's not just head, it's in hormones, it's in your gut, it's in sleep, it's everywhere. You're just drama queen. You're just woman. No, often it is something that needs to be addressed. It's a symptom, and if you're feeling dismissed, your symptoms are valid. They're signals, they're not drama.
Welcome to SeraTalks podcast, powered by Serapath.
Welcome to SeraTalks, the podcast where we cut through the noise of wellness trends and bring you real conversations on stress, overexposure, hormonal imbalances, and everything your doctor didn't have time to explain. My name is Dr. Vivek Narayan, and today's co-host is my colleague and co-founder, Aelita Matosova. Today we're diving into the science behind how your body responds to modern life and what you can actually do about it. Whether you're managing burnout, navigating polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, which is today's topic, or just trying to feel more human in a hectic world, SeraTalks is your go-to for clear, actionable insights. So, Aelita, welcome to this episode. We've been talking about PCOS, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this particular episode is that, you're our education specialist for women's health, but more importantly, I think there's a personal story over here that you wanted to share, and something that we thought that our listeners would find helpful. So generally, we have clients who come in and say they're just tired. There's sort of symptoms of vague exhaustion. Generally, people tend to dismiss those. But when we probe further, there's a scenario of irregular cycles, hair thinning, skin breakouts, and what people describe as total burnout.
Oh yeah, been there. I know that one. Let me guess. And my labs came back normal, so I guess it's just stress. Yeah, that drives me nuts, actually. Yes, it's stress, but it's not the way people think about it.
Right. So, and I think what we're going to be discussing over here is that stress, chronic stress, stress overexposure, what it really does is it creates an imbalance between hormones and that hormonal imbalance impacts men and women differently. So today's episode really is about how that imbalance occurs and manifests in women. So cortisol downregulates ovulation, sleep, digestion, and unfortunately, regular lab work doesn't catch this at all.
Yeah, if you're dealing with fatigue, irregular cycles, mood swings, and you have been told you are fine, take a pill, you will be okay, this episode is for you.
All right, cool. So we're going to break down how stress drives PCOS and some of the symptoms. We'll touch upon a little bit about perimenopause and anxiety. And obviously, we're going to be answering some questions from Instagram. So let's dive in. All right. So the first section is around what stress is actually doing to your hormones. And we're not going to get into too many technicalities over here because it is quite a dense topic. But if you have any questions, send it to us through our socials and we can point you in the right direction if you're interested. But we will cover a little bit about how hormones are in imbalance and what cortisol in particular is doing to that, right? So at a very high level, the stress system, what it does is it detects any threat, emotional, physical, and even doom scrolling. I'm sorry for all of you social media aficionados. And it triggers what's known as the HPA axis. So that's the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. The hypothalamus is located, and the pituitary, think of it as parts of the brain, and your adrenals are small glands that reside on top of the kidney. And if you think about it, it's actually quite a clever setup because all blood in the human body goes to the kidney. So if you want a broad systemic response, what you really want to be able to do is inject whatever hormone you're thinking about into the bloodstream through the kidneys, because that's just going to go everywhere, right? And so your adrenals release several hormones, including adrenaline, including cortisol, and that's really what that stress response is, right? And when it's one-off stress, it's fine, sure, because you can come back to baseline. But when it becomes chronic, when you're unable to come back to baseline, that's what causes trouble. So Aelita, perhaps you can tell our listeners cortisol versus progesterone, what's really going on over there?
Yeah, so in women, cholesterol is the shared precursor for both cortisol and progesterone. Under chronic stress, the body prioritizes cortisol production for survival, then that way diverting cholesterol away from progesterone synthesis. So this now leads to lower progesterone, which is disrupting the menstrual cycle. It worsens PMS. It increases anxiety through reduced GABA modulation. In men, it's slightly different. Vivek, you can highlight this point, how it works in men's situation.
Right. So the equivalent sort of competition, if you were to maybe describe it as that, between cortisol and instead of progesterone, here it's testosterone, right? So in other words, cholesterol is the precursor molecule that is used for synthesis for quote unquote what you would describe as sex hormones, right? And in men, this manifests mainly as an imbalance in testosterone levels, and through a cascade of events, reduced testosterone will result in then more pronounced fatigue symptoms, low libido, mood instability, and then ultimately muscle loss. And there's some negative feedback mechanisms that work over there, which we're not necessarily going to get to. But yeah, think about it in summation as chronic stress increases the pathway for increased cortisol synthesis, and you don't have enough ingredients for what it is that you really need to make, which in this case is testosterone, and in women, progesterone.
Yeah, so that's basically the kicker, right? Cortisol borrows from the same building blocks that your body uses for progesterone. Think about it as cortisol when shopping, but using progesterone's credit card. Over time, low progesterone, poor sleep, worse PMS in the regular and irregular cycles, like I said. And then estrogen becomes unopposed. And that brings us to all of this bloating, breast tenderness, mood swings, and then the picture worsens.
Right. And all of this is happening in a way in which it's not very easy to pick up on regular lab tests. So one of the things that we always talk about when we're talking with clients is that your regular lab work may be normal, but your ability to understand what's going on really is by being aware of how you're feeling and how your body's reacting and making a record of those symptoms, because those are some of the early indicators which will indicate an imbalance before any of your regular blood work actually will show up. And things like higher cortisol, lower DHEA, these are some very easy to do off the shelf saliva tests that one can actually do to get some insight into this. And that's not necessarily considered normal lab work. So even with normal lab work, all of what we're describing actually can happen. And a way to kind of figure this out is keeping a track of your symptoms, but also doing some of these at-home saliva lab.
And speaking about lab work, that's what happened to me actually, Vivek. I had multiple years of continuous care under OBGYN, one doctor. I never had my labs done actually for hormones. One. Number two, regular labs, the general blood count and stuff. It never showed up anything wrong with me. My labs were fine. Even when I came and I said, hey, something is wrong. I'm not feeling okay. There's too much going on in my head. I feel anxious. I feel disconnected with my family. Sometimes I just don't feel like myself. I feel like a dinosaur, a monster. Let's see what's going on. And only then my doctor asked me, maybe you want to do some hormonal check. And it came back almost normal. Only because I stopped taking birth control at some point, which is prescribed to everyone in the US. It's just this one pill, everyone take it, and it's solution for everything related to OBGYN. Only because I stopped taking that and my cycle was irregular now. And because of the slight increase in testosterone, which I also almost battled for prescribing to me. Only then, doctor kind of said like, oh, something is wrong. Something is wrong. That is probably PCOS. And guess what? Here. Take back this pill for birth control. This will solve all of your problems. And I said, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why PCOS is happening? But they said, we don't have answer. We don't know yet. The humanity just didn't solve this problem. Not yet. So that's when I took care in my own hands. And we can talk about it a little more.
Right. And I think what you're describing is really stories, or let's say interactions that are quite often it's actually more common than we think it is, which is, we have these symptoms. Some people would describe them as subacute. So there's really nothing that physicians can do about it apart from, as you're describing, is prescribe birth control. Now, birth control has this added benefit of people who are sexually active. They're actually on birth control. For some people, it's convenient. For some people, it's not convenient. This episode is not about birth control, but it is about the milieu of symptoms, stress, cortisol, an imbalance between cortisol and DHEA, and of course, the havoc that it wreaks on women's hormonal balance, right? Perhaps we can go into some questions from our audience members, and I think that'll help us describe some of the other symptoms that kind of pop up over here, right? So, Aelita, do you want to take the first one?
Sure. The one that we have here is from Wellness with Mira. The question is, can stress really stop your period, even if labs are normal? Short answer, quick answer is yes. It is more complex than just stress and stop period. But generally, that happened to me personally. Life events like moving to a different country, for example, with significant life changes. But generally, it is a documented and researched fact that stress can stop, can pause period. You can skip a cycle. And we discussed briefly the way how it is affected through a hormonal response. Vivek, if you want to talk a little more about hypothalamic amenorrhea and how it affects PCOS.
Hypothalamic amenorrhea is different but similar because it shares the same stress-related pathways. So there's some technicalities over here. I'm just going to explain what hypothalamic amenorrhea is. Amenorrhea is the absence of the menstrual cycle. It's controlled. It's basically because of the hypothalamus. So it's not exactly PCOS, but it shares, again, the stress-related pathways. And so it's just another condition that we often see in the clinical setting as well. it's related. It's fundamentally stress related. And I think a lot of women athletes actually will have a common experience related to this, which is, they tend to have amenorrhea or imbalances or irregularities in their period because of various hormonal imbalances, but also because they're just performing at such a level where there's so much stress on their body, and it's all regulated through cortisol. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, chronic stress causes ovulation, and then no ovulation, no period. And it is a smart survival response, but confusion when you are not trying to conceive necessarily. So body is talking, it's saying not a safe time to reproduce. But if you have been told that it's normal to skip just one cycle, yeah, it happens, that's a red flag.
All right, cool. So I think the short of it is that stress can stop your period, and it doesn't necessarily show up in the regular lab work. And sometimes it doesn't even show up in specialty lab work as well. All right, next question. This is a common misconception that some people have, and it's actually something that we struggled with in med school as well. How can I have PCOS if I don't have cysts? And I think just to expand on this, what they're really saying is that on ultrasound, they didn't have cysts in their ovaries.
Yeah, that's a great question. The names actually is outdated. PCOS, the C stands for cyst there. PCOS is more about hormonal imbalance overall. It is irregular periods, it is insulin resistance, it is high androgens, not cysts necessarily. Cysts are just one possible sign, one of the anatomic symptoms. And most of the damage is actually metabolic. It's driven by insulin and cortisol and not what shows on actually physically on ultrasound.
And for those who are listening, if you do have cysts on ultrasound in the ovary, then generally that's going to be classified as PCOD. So PCOS and PCOD, think of them as a constellation of overlapping symptoms. PCOS is more driven metabolically, and the cysts are actually a hallmark of PCOD, so polycystic ovarian disease. Since we have been talking about metabolically driven primarily, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what's happening with cortisol and insulin resistance. And I think this is really, I guess I'm foreshadowing over here, but I think you have a good personal success story over here. So maybe you can describe to the audience a little bit about how cortisol is sort of intermingling with insulin resistance and what that really does to the body. And we can get into how we can deal with it a little later, but what is it doing to the human body?
So talking about metabolism, cortisol chronically released in the bloodstream when we are chronic stress, that spikes blood sugar, and that leads to insulin resistance. That's a simple way of explaining that. Now, what happens even if we are exercising, if we are eating well, constant cortisol sabotages our bodies. And we can spend endless hours in gym. We can eat only greens, and we still might have some stubborn weight, still might feel stressed, we still might feel anxious, which is all can relate to just metabolic issue.
So to summarize, what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's insulin resistance drives ovulation issues, androgen excess, inflammation, and that really has almost like a negative feedback cycle. Well, in physiology, you would call that a positive feedback cycle, but that's always confusing for people because it's leading to negative effects. And even though you're eating reasonably well and exercising, it's that sustained high level of cortisol, which is actually causing that big problem. So, and one of the things that we actually saw when we were doing research on this for this episode, and this is a recent study in 2025, a study found that women under chronic physiological stress were twice as likely to show PCOS symptoms, even with a normal BMI.
Yeah, that's right. Same fit, high-performing women. There is no one who is immune if stress is chronic.
All right. So if we can't out-diet and out-exercise the stress response, and if the stress response is in overdrive, what exactly can we do? If you can't out-diet or out-exercise a stress response which is stuck in overdrive, what actually helps? So let's talk about some solutions. And what we're going to cover over here is around circadian rhythm, its role in hormonal regulation, and how that helps with cortisol, but also with melatonin. And then finally, Aelita is an expert at this. We'll be talking about behavioral stacking, so combining light exposure, movement, and mindful eating. And this really is what is going to help with that chronic stress exposure, and then indirectly help with PCOS. Aelita, talk us through what it is that you have been doing that has really kind of helped you. And I think it's been a personal revelation, actually.
Yeah, right. So the women body, especially given the hormones and cycle, is very complex. And unfortunately, there is no a magic pill. It would be very, of course, convenient, but no. It's about small and consistent shifts, right? And as we've been talking, you can see how everything basically connected to everything. Our food, our rest, exercises. So really for me, first step that I thought I needed was to just restart completely my metabolic health, my metabolism, right? So after learning my labs, after seeing that my testosterone is slightly increased, which again, doctor says like, it's like almost nothing. But given my symptoms and what my body was telling me, it wasn't nothing. So my testosterone was slightly increased. My cortisol was slightly increased. They're produced from the same place. So my adrenal glands are exhausted, right? My metabolism is also shifted. It's not working the way it's supposed to work because of this consistently released cortisol, right? Due to chronic stress. So now the first step that I started with was just excluding all high glycemic index foods from my diet. It is not easy. I was going hard on myself and I just cut off everything. But really, it doesn't have to be that strict. It doesn't have to be that hard. One can start with just, for example, stopping eating white bread, white pastries for the first week. Second week, you add or rather exclude chocolate and candies. Third week, you can exclude something starchy food, right? So that was one thing. And that actually, that's where I found my first shift. Another addition that helped a lot is start my day with just a glass of fiber. I tried a few different types of fiber. They're not always very good. Some of them taste like my daughter says, some of them taste like cardboard. I found one which is not necessarily maybe the best because it has added flavors, but at least it's not gross and it works. So that's fine. So fiber, healthy foods. I have a good recipe of smoothie that I also use as my breakfast. Basically, it's a superfood. It's a super recipe. It has everything you can possibly need in there. We can share it somewhere in the comments, description, or something. Vivek, if you want to, you can jump on into explaining how the restart of metabolism works, and then I can talk more about what the other things I did regarding exercise, sleep, and mindfulness. But that was my first point start.
Right.
Metabolism.
So addressing metabolism, and really the aim over here is to reduce the glycemic load on the body. And by reducing the glycemic load on the body, what you're doing is you're bringing into balance both the insulin resistance portion and the cortisol portion of it, right? So the sugar spike, quote unquote, is being prevented, which will help with the insulin spike, but also you're creating an environment where you're making an impact on those cortisol levels as well. Because when you have a sugar spike and you have a spike in insulin, you automatically have a crash afterwards, and that crash is perceived as stress, and so cortisol is then released after that crash. So by preventing that spike, you have prevented that crash, and then by preventing that crash, you have prevented that spike in cortisol levels. So that's really what's happening with the metabolic reset. And the way it's being done here is to make sure that you're having a protein-rich breakfast and generally avoiding foods which have a high glycemic index, right? And I think Aelita, your favorite one was obviously the smoothie. And then there's another tip over here, and the coffee drinkers are not necessarily going to like this. But if you're having coffee on an empty stomach, that's probably not a good idea. So have coffee with some food, preferably. If you're not going to be able to have food the first thing in the morning, avoid that coffee or consider taking fiber supplements and so on and so forth. All right. So the next one, morning sunlight.
Actually, before we move to the sunlight and circadian rhythms, Vivek, I wanted to add about metabolism and restarting it. One big thing for me was understanding how I feel if I actually skip meals. I thought that, the less I eat, the faster and better and leaner I will look and the best I will feel it. But it's actually not true. I noticed that I felt when I didn't have food in the morning, and I can go, really, it doesn't make a big deal for me. I can go hungry all day. But I noticed when I didn't have food, I actually feel same way as if I'm stressed specifically about something, like someone honked when you were crossing the street, right? And you feel this rush, you feel this, you feel your heart, you have this little bit of hand tremor, and it was, I just felt uncomfortable. So for me, big deal was actually not going hungry, because the longer I go hungry, the more cortisol release and the more of opposite effect of being, in this state it's actually going to make. My hacks now is I now found good low sugar snacks like granola bars, like some low sugar cookies with fiber in it, which I just always keep in my car. I have literally my seat. This is passenger seat, and in the passenger seat in the back pocket, I have cookies which I can reach at any time, have a quick bite if I'm, late somewhere, and I'm always late somewhere. And I have a bottle of protein shake in the car all the time too. It's just always there. I never go absolutely empty stomach. Even now, I have my apples here just in case if I need some. So healthy snacks, that makes a huge difference.
Awesome. Why don't you describe a little bit, and this has become quite popular now, but just describe what's happening with morning sunlight and what's going on over there.
Right. Yeah. Morning. So mornings, I'm not a morning person, and I generally don't want to wake up in the morning. I don't understand why do I have to wake up for school if I don't even have to go to school. I'm not the one going to school. I did my 10 years in school, and every morning is a struggle for me. So what really helps, and Vivek can explain why, is first thing in the morning, I actually open curtains and let the natural light in the room. When we were choosing apartments for rent, the sun in the morning in bedroom was one of the most important things for us to make our decision as a family. So that morning light is actually, I almost feel immediately I'm in a better mood when I see the sunshine. Vivek, you can explain why, but that's something that sets your body towards the day. It sets the mood for you. It sets the line what your body should be doing for the rest of the day. So yes, you now woke up, you now had your cortisol and just enough, just good to start your day. That sun helps you release this cortisol naturally. It tells you like, yeah, you're ready. That's it. Then day has started. And then you go on with your day, your cortisol goes down, you eat something, preferably not the time when you should have coffee. And then you go on with your day. And at the end of the day, we again should work with the light and how the naturally sun goes. And we should, with the sun sets, we should wind down our lights in the house, switching if possible to more yellow lights, switching there's this cool feature on our devices where we switch to black and white mode or to yellow mode. You can set it up, but it would just go automatically after whatever time you set. Mine is automatically set after 7 p.m. Going into yellow mode. And then my phone is also automatically set to go into sleep mode at 8:30 because my sleep time is 10:30. So 2 hours before going to sleep, all of my notifications, everything is snoozed. Everything is, excuse me, everything is switched off. And my very favorite part of devices and my very favorite switch that I've done and very proud of, I like to read before going to sleep. And I used to find it very convenient to read on my phone because, you don't have to carry a book. But now I actually switched to actual physical paper books, and I absolutely love it. I have this cute little light that I click on my book. It's of course yellow. And then I just read a few pages and I wind down and I have the best sleeps ever. And for your understanding, I used to wake up every single night for the longest time. I used to wake up at night and have hard time falling asleep. I wouldn't have troubles to fall asleep initially, but I woke up every night, every day. And sometimes it's easy to go back to sleep. Sometimes it wasn't easy to go back to sleep. But potentially not, of course, on the first day, but potentially with building that routine, with building that schedule, I got so used to it. My body just, okay, I'm ready. It's time to sleep. I don't even feel like sometimes on weekend going out and hang out because I know that at 9 p.m., at 10 p.m., I will be so sleepy. I'll just want to go home.
All right, so let's break down what you've described and see if we can maybe explain how this has impacted the hormonal cascade that we described. And obviously that's had. And I think one of the things that we should get into at some point is maybe like a snapshot of, say, before and after, which is, you were struggling with these symptoms. And after implementing some of the lifestyle changes that you're talking about, what improvement or what change has actually occurred, right? So a brief thing about sunlight exposure or morning light exposure, as it's called. And fundamentally what's happening is that light hits our retina, and our retina, which is the back of the eye, has particular receptors that are attuned to a specific blue light frequency. So sky blue is that frequency. It's no coincidence that we have developed the ability to register that particular color, right? So what's happening is in the morning so cortisol levels increase, and that is the spike. Think about it as a small spike that actually wakes us up. And then when we get exposed to morning sunlight, that response is exaggerated because of light. And that actually jumpstarts the day. And it's an anchoring event for what is known as the circadian rhythm. Now, that early morning cortisol spike is directly correlated to a decrease in cortisol in the evening, but more importantly, a transition into an increase in melatonin, which is actually what's going to help you sleep, right? So making sure that these anchoring events, along with the first sort of meal of the day, those are the core anchoring events around which the circadian rhythm is built and which will then help regulate sleeping and waking, but also making sure that your cortisol balance is maintained. And so think of food, your ability to rest and recuperate and sleep as some of the core pillars of what it is that one needs to do to be able to dampen down some of the symptoms that one experiences with PCOS. Before you made these changes, what were you experiencing? How long did you take to make these changes? And what has been the change in the symptoms?
My main symptoms, it's actually started since I was a child. Ever since my period started, I have always had regular period. And I've been through endless cycle of labs, doctors, and it's always have been one solution: birth control. When I was a teenager, I was on birth control, and I was just basically on and off birth control my whole life. And then it is well known fact with PCOS and in irregular cycle, it is very hard to get pregnant. And I actually did get pregnant, and then I had a miscarriage again because of the hormonal imbalance. We need that balance for carrying a child as well. And then by some miracle, I actually got pregnant and I successfully delivered my child. And I want to make sure that she is healthy and she doesn't go through whatever that stuff that I went through, right? And my symptoms mainly were, of course, cycle on and off. It could have been 6 months without cycle. It could have been 2 months of bleeding. It was all over the place. With birth control, of course, it's in time, but even with birth control, the other symptoms were not treated necessarily. It is a stress type of weight of fat spread, something weight around your bellies, that one. Fat around your belly, it's that one. Mood swings, like I mentioned before, being in a really monstrosity mood 1 minute, and then, oh my God, I love everyone so much. My family is the best. Next moment, and then 5 minutes after is like, okay, again, oh my God, why can't you people just listen? I don't understand why everything is so annoying. So that's a big one. And sleep deprivation, like I said, waking up in the middle of the night. Why? Who knows? Brain just going into all this possible anxious thoughts. What if that? What if this? This constant anxiety, day and night. And so that's anxiety, I think, was the last one, which I was so tired of all of these symptoms that's when I took it all in my own hands and made my own care plan. So then I would say I've been doing some exercises, healthier eatings, but then I just got very, I wouldn't say, and a month, 2 months maybe, is when I was very much on top of it. This 2 months I saw already my period being in place, in time, with any medications, just exercise, mental health regulations, breathing, meditations, and proper eating. And then now it's been almost 9 months-ish when my period is in time, every time, within the normal range of variations, 7 days plus minus, but it's in time. I have never ever for my whole life since my period started, I have never ever had period being in time for several months without any medications.
So, remind us again, so how long did you start seeing? And I know that this is a gradual change, so there's probably no definite like cutoff. Like I did this for 2 months and this is what happened. But give us a sense of how long after you started, how long did it take you to implement the changes? And before you started noticing a change enough for you to be like, oh, it seems like it's working.
It took me about a month to implement changes. Not just implement, get used to them and feel like they are part of my life. Normal. About a month. And then about 4 to 6 weeks is when I would say that I started, especially anxiety. This is the first one that got better. That one I could feel not immediately, but maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks max, maybe even less. And then cycle. So yeah, 2 months probably. I would say that's when I saw all the areas being affected and feel better. Sleep was the last one to go back to normal. First was anxiety.
So if you could describe, we say, oh, anxiety, and we kind of feel as if everyone recognizes what anxiety is, but everyone experiences anxiety in different ways, right? So do you mind walking or talking us through whatever you're comfortable sharing, obviously?
Yeah.
Not necessarily what was making you anxious, but just how you were living through what appeared and felt to be anxiety for you.
So that's actually the thing, Vivek. It's not about what making you feel anxious. Anything and everything and nothing can make you feel anxious when you are just in that state of mind, right? And frankly, basically everything makes you feel anxious. Work, family, relationship, what are you going to wear today? You just feel like, what if I dress and it's too cold or too hot and I will be uncomfortable, and that uncomfortable will lead to some other uncomfortable, and then I won't be able to concentrate on what am I actually doing. It's just a cascade of feelings of worrying about things and things and things. And then you get annoyed with all of that. And innocent, you're just constantly worried, you're constantly nervous, and that all triggers being this so irritated that whatever happens, all of this is going on in your head. You're overwhelmed with all of these thoughts. And then innocent, simple, like, hey, mom, when is dinner, for example, question from my child. It's just last drop to what been boiling in your head, and then you just explode because you feel like you have so much going on right now in your head, and right now another task, another something, another need was thrown at you, and you just don't take it adequately. It took me all possible internal strengths not to make it into a fight or be inadequately responsive or shout, anything at my child, because my brain understands that it's just dinner. It's just simple question. But my feelings are all agitated.
Yeah, and I think you had an interesting way of describing this. I think you used to call it feeling dinosaur-y, as in a spoof or a take on the T-Rex, right? A dinosaur that's getting aggro and, so on and so forth. So you described stubborn weight, and I think that's a typical sort of or some people refer to that as cortisol weight. So, there's belly fat, and in some cases there's fat on the back and the shoulders, and hump neck is what we used to call it in medical school from some of the old British literature. I don't think people use that terminology anymore, but often it's seen with people who take corticosteroids for a very, very long time. They actually develop that same physicality with the stubborn weight on certain parts of the body. And how long did it take you to get rid of some of that stubborn weight? And what does that make you feel like? Because I know that, and again, these are personal questions. You're welcome to be like, yeah, no, I don't want to talk about it. But, men, women, young women in particular, we are conscious about the way we look. So could you describe, if you're okay sharing, what it is that you felt, why this particular type of body weight was really annoying you? And then once it started to go away, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, you're right. It's actually a sensitive topic, I think, for many to talk. And I think it's important that I actually describe how I felt about it and be open about it. So body picture was another anxiety point for me too. This being in this state of mind, being annoyed with everything and looking in the mirror and thinking like, why is this piece there? Like I look normal overall, but that just weight, that body fat is just disproportional. It just doesn't feel right. Forget about look. It doesn't feel right. I could tell that it's just not right. And it was annoying me. It was really, really annoying me, adding to my anxiety. And I've been going to gym like regularly. I've been going to gym. I've been doing weightlifting. Like I said, I've been eating what I thought healthy, but it wasn't working. At the best, it was keeping me at where I am. And like I said, that was very frustrating. So what helped and how it helped is that I shift mindset from I need to lose weight and I need to look different to I need to take care of my stress and analyzing what actually stresses me out and what causes this cortisol spikes for me. That's what helped me. Like I would go to a gym, for example, in the morning and exercise on empty stomach, right? Just having some water. And that would stress my body only more. That just something that exercising would not do good for me because I'm hungry, my body is stressed. While I'm exercising, cortisol is being released. So that just defeats the purpose, basically, right? So really creating a balance is what helped. That's one thing. And the other thing is, again, taking care of my thoughts, taking care of my behaviors, my attitude toward things, pausing, reflecting, relaxing, noticing when I'm stressed, taking breaths, taking my time to actually stop and think or stop and actually don't think and do nothing and let my body breathe in, breathe out and switch brain from flight or fight mode. And that's when miracle happened. I'm kidding you not. My gym routine didn't change. I was a little stricter with that, but not that much. That's where I started my journey, right? With balance and with mental health approach. And that's when I actually started weight melt. I was like, what's going on? I noticed it. My surrounding noticed it. My friends. It just disappeared. Those just few pounds. It wasn't a lot, but it visually was different. I was so happy. I was so happy. I just wanted to go out and about. I wanted to wear all the possible dresses I have in my wardrobe and see how I newly look and my old clothes.
So you said something which I think is important. You were able to figure out what your root stressor was. So we've been working on SATS, which is our stress assessment and tracking survey. So did did working on SATs give you a sense of what your root stressors were, or was it something else? How were you able to figure out what your root stressors were?
It was both, it was SATs, and generally I was trying to take care of my own issue. And we've been doing research for our SATs, right? Because it's based on it's data backed, right? So reading through materials, understanding how the body works actually helped me to get to the point of where my stress is coming from. Because like many, we think sometimes that it's all in my head. I'm stressed. I just need to chill out. I just need to relax. But it's not only that. Like I said, for me, for example, it was quite surprising for me that metabolic stress affected me a lot. It was quite surprising for me, and it was eye-opening when I paused, stopped, and understood that I am stressed when I'm hungry. I am not hungry person. I do not get annoyed that I didn't have food. I'm not looking for food. I'm like, no, okay, I didn't eat. That's fine. I'm just busy. I could forget to eat. I could just go on with my day-to-day tasks. I really just forget to eat sometimes. And while I'm going with my tasks, I'm stressed. I'm noticing that it's actually much harder to do whatever I need to do. My brain is not functioning. I feel foggy. And then I go and eat a big bowl of whatever, everything food, even if it's absolutely healthy, if it's a huge bowl of salad and chicken there, still I have a lot of it, and because I haven't eaten all day, and then I just crash.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is focusing on metabolic. The metabolic health issue was a surprising revelation for you, and I think the SATs helped with that, trying to break that apart a little bit, and then trying to understand what the stressors were. So I think that's one of the advantages of having a structured approach, which is, because symptoms, behaviors, lifestyles are so different, if you have a structured way of understanding what the root cause is, that really helps one create a plan just to address that. And that has a knock-on effect, as you've described, on other parts of it, and ultimately helped you with, bringing some of those symptoms back into control. So I know that would have been a very difficult conversation for you, describing it, because there's so much emotion associated with what you've been describing. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I just want to recognize that it is difficult to talk about, and it does take courage to go out and talk about these sorts of things. So hopefully, people listening in and tuning in will recognize that as well. All right. So the last part of this episode is going to be almost like a rapid fire, a myth busting episode. So for example, the first one, birth control fixes hormone imbalance.
It masks symptoms, doesn't fix cortisol, blood sugar, or nutrient issues.
Okay, cool. PCOS only affects overweight women.
False lean PCOS is real and often even harder to diagnose.
Okay. If labs are normal, hormones are fine.
Labs are just snapshots, symptoms the real story. We need a complex understanding.
Stress is just in your head.
Stress leaves fingerprints everywhere. It's not just head, it's in hormones, it's in your gut, it's in sleep, it's everywhere.
All right. That's actually the who's who of some of the common myths that we actually see. So that's a good one. Any other myth that you'd like to bust while you have the opportunity?
Not necessarily myths. I just want to say that women also often dismissed with their symptoms. It is a historical thing that women generally tend to be perceived as more emotional. And if someone is experiencing mood swings and lots of emotions, let's put it this way, they're like, you're just drama queen. You're just woman. No, often it is something that needs to be addressed. It's a symptom. And if you're feeling dismissed, your symptoms are valid. They're signals. They're not drama. Don't wait for lab from that your body is struggling. Are your body already telling you something? Listen. Start with patterns. Start with lifestyle. Start with SATs.
And that's the stress assessment tracking survey. And that's up on our website. We have a free version on our chatbot as well. And we can put links in the notes and so on and so forth. And if you actually have questions, reach out to us on our socials. We'd be happy to help you out. And this is a no-cost interaction. It's part of our mission to help educate individuals and help them better figure out how best to manage not only busy lifestyles, but stress overexposure and so on and so forth. So thank you for joining us today. Until next time, I think the message is that your body is trying to talk to you.
Are you ready to listen? There is actually something that I wanted to add and to reach out. And if you feel like you are dismissed and your symptoms are not validated, I'm happy to educate and guide you how to advocate for yourself with your healthcare provider and your OBGYN, and what are the possible lab tests that you should and can ask of your provider. And even if not provider, there are private labs. That's where I started, and that's where I saw my first signals and symptoms and got it all together. So don't feel free to reach out with these questions as well.
Awesome. So your body's talking to you. And, I think what Aelita is basically saying is that, are you ready to listen? So with that,
Are you?
we're going to close the episode. And I'd like to thank Aelita for joining us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek, for this conversation. Thank you for letting me vent out and tell everyone my story. I think it's sharing is caring. I hope it helps someone.
Awesome. Thanks.